So actually, in this court packing thing, and turning to our next segment of the show, I want to talk a little bit today. We're going to talk about what Biden would do in what could Biden do in 4 years. The reason we're talking about this, that's a kind of a funny thing I mentioned, I think, one day last week, is my husband and I were at some function and with some friends who aren't as political as we are. And one of them had said, oh, I went and voted already, because in Texas, we've been voting for a while. I voted already. I said, oh boy, yeah, really big year, tense year. And this friend said, yeah, but how much damage could Biden do in 4 years? Now, to be clear, I think this person votes Republican. I think they probably voted for Trump. But I thought that was a great kickoff, a great launching point for a really serious conversation on a deep dive Monday like today. How much damage could Biden do in 4 years? Because some people who maybe don't like President Trump's tweets or his personality or his life history or some other reason they're upset with President Trump, they kind of think, well, okay, I don't like Trump, even though I like some of his policies, so how bad could it be? I'll go ahead and vote for Biden this time because, Trump, things are sure rocky in America under Trump, so maybe we're better off voting for Biden. So I want to dedicate the rest of the show, or most of the rest of the show, for telling you how bad it could get if Biden were to win. In the final segment, we're going to talk today about how we're really doing in the polls, but I want to really lay out for you how bad it could get if Biden wins. To be really clear, and everyone knows this, but Biden, if you watch him at all, is not, he's no longer mentally of sound mind. He is suffering some form of dementia. He gets confused, off track, says things he doesn't mean. I have really pretty much avoided playing those on this show because I feel like it's making fun of someone who's obviously seriously struggling. But I'll play just one little clip to remind you about how confused Biden is in these days. And I think this is Matt the Wonderful had the audacity to take vacation. It's unbelievable. But I have Derek, who's also wonderful, here today. And so actually, Derek, I didn't number the clips, but it's from the article where he's from Fox News article about vote fraud. I want to play a quick clip by Joe Biden.
We're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Okay.
Secondly,
we're in a situation almost a Freudian slip. I mean, of course, his defenders say he didn't mean to say they put together vote fraud. Well, they have put together, the left has put together a massive vote fraud effort in this election cycle. Obviously, he was trying to say, we're trying to prevent or uncover or something vote fraud, but they have put together, what he said is what they've actually done. And that's just one of many. He had one recently where he said something like he made reference to thinking he's running against George W. Bush. But the real point of this segment, I want to just try to really deep dive in and talk about why this election is so consequential and why people you may know, or maybe you yourself are on the fence thinking, well, things sure have been divisive in America under President Trump. So maybe a vote for Biden can just take the pressure off and, we'll move forward. How bad could it get? How much damage could Biden do in 4 years? Let me just start with the issue of COVID. On this show, and if all of you are you're kind of news hounds, you watch for news all the time, you've heard other places where this has happened. But just on this show, we had a doctor named Simone Gold. She's been very outspoken. She's a California-based doctor. If you want to go back and look on YouTube or on any places you find my show, go back to the October 21st show. Dr. Simone Gold was on my show in studio, and she's basically talking about the idea that COVID-19, the coronavirus thing, that we have in America, no reason at all to be panicked. No reason to be having shutdowns. No reason to have American culture and society shut down. No reason to have schools closed. No reason to mandate masks. No reason to mandate social distancing. Among the kernels of great wisdom she passed along, and you should pass along, was the idea that the tiny little microbe that is a COVID-19 microbe is 1/1000th the size of one strand of human hair. Her point being, no mask anyone in America is wearing can keep that out. No mask. Masks are useless. And as she pointed out in the show, we're going to have, we have masks being mandated. They do no good at all, and they have a very detrimental effect on our culture, our society, our ability to interact. Dr. Gold, spoke about the idea that we have a healthcare issue with respect to COVID-19, something to handle, but we have a constitutional crisis. And she's a lawyer too, a constitutional crisis in this country because we've been surrendering our freedom in response to the fear that is being put out by the federal government about COVID-19. And Dr. Gold is not alone. There are dozens, in fact, hundreds of doctors in America and around the world trying to sound the alarm bell, trying to say what we're doing in response to COVID-19 makes no sense at all. She pointed out that masks, if you do research, before the time COVID-19 came along, try researching wearing masks to prevent catching a virus. There's nothing. In fact, Fauci himself wrote previously, it's pointless. So we're in a place, though, where we have masks being mandated at various levels by state and local government. We have the federal government, and there was the most astonishing thing. In fact, Simone Gold called me the same day she was on the show. She's back in California later, called me to tell me that the NIH put out a new, it's not a ruling, but it's a new information, a new recommendation that essentially said that all of the therapies that are available, that people who are suffering with COVID-19 are taking and finding to be effective, all of them, says the NIH in a recent edict, all of them should never be given to a patient unless they're already on the hospital on a ventilator. I mean, the level of dishonesty is unspeakable in that. And so that the people who have on this show, we've had Dr. Richard Bartlett from Midland, Texas, talking about how he has found tremendous positive results from inhaled budesonide, which is a steroid, treats COVID patients with that, who are struggling for breath, who almost instantly feel better, who get better in 24 hours. We have hydroxychloroquine being advocated by Dr. Gold and hundreds of other doctors, on-the-ground doctors treating patients, and yet you have the federal government putting out an edict saying you really shouldn't be giving all these medications out that are working for COVID-19 patients until they're already on ventilators, already can't breathe, and they're saying already dying. The idea that our government is telling doctors in this country they should not be prescribing a medication that doctors are telling them works. We're living in a twilight zone on this topic. So back to my point about what Biden can do in 4 years. Imagine because right now it's happening. One doctor who was added to the coronavirus task force by President Trump, Dr. Scott Atlas is pointing out, he's been saying there is no reason to be wearing masks. He's been talking about the efficacy of various treatments. He's been talking about the idea that the entire response in our country to COVID-19 and in the world, the whole response was unjustified by the lethality rate, unjustified by the danger. We have a 99.9% or 0.8% recovery rate for pretty much everyone in America, and yet we are being told the country still may have to be shut down again, and the country still is shut down in many places, mainly in Democrat states. And then you had Joe Biden come along, and this is another clip I sent to Derek, the also wonderful, and this is Biden and his views on a mask mandate. Biden and the mask mandate, if we can play that one.
This virus. First, I'll go to every governor, urge them to mandate mask wearing in their states. And if they refuse, I'll go to the mayors and county executives and get local masking requirements in place nationwide. As president, I'll mandate mask wearing in all federal buildings and all interstate transportation.
So you have to get this idea. When the doctors are telling the government and telling the American public that that COVID-19, well, you know, of course you have to take care of yourself. You should take good care of yourself and get care if you contract it. That people, they're in these own doctors' experiences, they're in the thousands and they're in the tens of thousands of cases completely through the reliance on these therapies being suggested. There's another one that President Trump was treated with while he was in the hospital with COVID. I think he had remdesivir, one of the ones, whatever he had. The point is, there are numerous therapies. Doctors say they're working. Patients say, I got better. This is great. And you have the federal government issuing the NIH thing, which just said, and again, it says NIH, their caption on their announcement, no treatments recommended. No treatments recommended for COVID-19 patients without supplemental oxygen, without being on ventilators. I mean, this is an order to kill people. What the NIH is putting out, it's an order to kill people. To say to doctors, you've got these great treatments, everyone can see they're working, but don't use them, heaven forbid. No, 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 no. Make sure they're already in the hospital dying, and then maybe you can try these things. So what Biden could do, and a guy who is committed to saying he's going to mask mandate, you're going to have everything about the COVID treatments that is shutting down the economy, shutting down people's lives, forcing businesses to close, forcing people to stay at home. All of that will be multiplied in spades. I mentioned Dr. Scott Atlas, who is serving on the task force for coronavirus under President Trump. But his own tweets, his own speeches, his own comments, a doctor who was placed on this coronavirus commission by President Trump is being shut down by the media. The only voice he has is if Trump might say, hey, you know, I think Dr. Scott Atlas had a good point. What do you think will happen to America under COVID-19 if Biden should win? What do you think? Do you think that Biden, will begin to listen to doctors, that he will say, hey, wait a minute, what are these doctors saying about masks not being helpful? The doctors who are in favor of the freedom of the American people, they're having a hard enough time already getting their message out with a relatively friendly Trump administration. But imagine if you have the Biden administration. They're all about mandates, they're all about masks, they're all about shutting down. And there's an even deeper point about COVID in this day where we're talking about how bad could it get under coronavirus. You may recall I mentioned Dr. Gold being on my show. I've also had Dr. Bartlett, Richard Bartlett, be on my show. I've had other doctors who actually treat COVID patients. They're all talking about the idea that COVID is not a pandemic, we are overreacting, and that we are surrendering freedom. Especially Simone Gold has been articulate and outspoken and passionate, saying we're surrendering freedom. And this gets me around to my deepest point about COVID. We are watching in this country the impending Marxist takeover of America. That is not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration. This is where we are in this country. If you did not, by the way, catch a show I had recently, I had Trevor Loudon on my show. Trevor Loudon, an enormously consequential researcher, enormously, he happens to have an Australian accent. He's from Australia, but he's an American and he writes in America. He's done deep research, and we talked about it. He was on my show, if you want to watch it, October 15th. He has done research to connect the dots between the organizations in America who are backing the riots, backing the destruction of property, backing the riots seen all over this country, in Portland and Chicago and Minneapolis and just at Kenosha, all over this country. And America was being told that those riots were the result of people being upset about the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis. Fortunately for us, if you heard Trevor Loudon, if you didn't, go back and listen to it. He did the deep dive research to point out the organizations and the money behind the organizations that are fomenting and funding and encouraging this violence. All of it stems from Marxism in this country and ultimately the Marxist communist roots going all the way back to communist China. He connects the dots for people who want to understand the facts. There are organizations in this country ideologically and financially and through their leadership connected with the Chinese Communist Party, connected with the Marxist movement that seized on the opportunity of the George Floyd incident to begin to foment violence in the streets in our country, try to blame it on George Floyd, but the fact was this is bought and paid for fomented revolution against America as founded, against the very founding of America. That's what we're watching. As Trevor Loudon pointed out, the Marxists in this country, we've had the communists in this country since 1920, the Revolutionary Communist Party in this country, their leader of us, Bob Avakian's been saying, hey, 2020, this is our time. We're going to take over America. This is our opportunity. Revolutionary Communist of America Party is telling America we're going to take over. The violence you're seeing in the streets, never condemned by the Democrats, never condemned by anyone in the American left, creating unrest, funded by, orchestrated by, controlled by the radical Marxists and communists and the Communist Party of China. And we're watching this in our streets, and those groups for decades working to destabilize America, to teach America's youth that America is not a good and wonderful country, that capitalism is evil, that socialism, Marxism, communism are the answers. This was the crescendo. This is the building up to where they got to in 2016. They thought they had 8 years of Obama the Marxist doing all sorts of Marxist things in our federal government. And then they thought they had in 2016, they thought they had Hillary all set to come into power. She's going to come in. The plan of these organizations was to have Hillary immediately, within the first 100 days of her administration, legalize all the illegal aliens in America, and all the numbers range. 22 million is a very conservative number. 22 million illegal aliens in this country. Legalize them all, get them all, not just legalized, but made citizens with a right to vote. And that was going to be what the revolutionary communists, Marxist, socialists left in this country. That was their mission. They would have the permanent left-wing, anti-American Marxist majority in this country, and we would lose America as founded. And this is exactly what Hillary and the leftists had planned for 2016. Fortunately, through God's protection, we did not have a Hillary victory. So now we're here in 2020. These same leftists who thought they had it all figured out under Hillary are seeing this election, this opportunity, as the time they're going to bring finally to have this overthrow of freedom in America. And one pathway they found, so they've created violence in the streets, created fear in the streets, tried to blame, the left. This is happening in left-wing states, in left-wing cities, fomented by Democrats, fomented by the left, praised by AOC, praised by all the radical leftists in this country, never condemned by any of them. And you had that all going on, and then you had COVID-19 come along, which, as even Jane Fonda, still a radical leftist, commented on. Her quote was essentially, COVID is a gift to the leftists in this country. COVID is a gift to the leftists in this country. The left in this country have used the crisis of COVID as not even a crisis, the appearance of COVID, the challenge of COVID, used it in this country to justify putting into place the growing government power in Washington, the kind of, they're conditioning the American people to feel like, well, we have to surrender our liberty. We wait to be told by our mayor, our city council person, or our county judge, or the governor, or somebody, whether we're allowed to go outside, whether we can open our business, how many people we can have in our business, where we can stand, what we have to wear, mask or whatever else is, how close we can stand to people. We have, in this less than 1 year since COVID's been around in America and creating policy, we've had a substantial shift in the American population and the electorate to where we used to think, January of this year, we used to think, you get up in the morning, you decide what you're going to do, where you're going to go today, you're going to go to your job, you're going to go to your business, you're going to open your business, whatever you're going to do. And now we have been, or some portion of the American people have been conditioned to think, I wait to be told what to do. I wait to be told if I can go to work. I wait to be told if I can go to the store today. I wait to be told if I can open my business, and if I do, how many customers can I have, what I have to wear. And this is all in the face of the doctors in this country, as we've been on this show cataloging, saying masks do no good at all. This is not a crisis. We do not need to be shutting down America. So you have, I'm trying to get at what I'm telling you, people, when I'm saying what Biden can do in 4 years. Biden, and he won't be in charge. It'll be Kamala Harris, and whoever she brings in as her VP, because Biden's going to be out of the picture within 24 hours. He has no idea what's going on. But it's going to be Kamala Harris and whoever else the Democrat radical Marxist left brings in to support her, continuing to utilize COVID as a means of shifting the culture of freedom in America, shifting the political assumptions Americans make. We have in this country since our founding assumed we have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and we decide where we work, and we decide whether to open our business today, and we decide whether to wear a mask, and we decide whether to open our business, stay home, or be sheltered in. And we have, within the 10 months or so as COVID's been around in America, we have seen a radical effort by the leftists in this country to not just order masks and social distancing and staying home and shelter in place, but even worse, it is an insidious infection into the minds and hearts of the American people that causes them to not even realize they're surrendering their freedom. Instead, they're being good and cooperative citizens, and they're going along with the government who says, oh yeah, I'm not allowed to go out today, so I guess I better stay home all day. You will see the loss of freedom in this country on steroids if Biden-Harris win, because the left recognizes the anger over the George Floyd incident, compounded with the COVID, the invasion of COVID in America. You will see them treat both of those incidents as justification for massively increased government power, massively increased government control, massive changing of all sorts of laws, regulations, policies, and assumptions, all not because they're telling you we are engaged in the Marxist takeover of this country. It's because they're doing it. They're doing it in front of our faces. And this is why, for those of you who can't figure out why some of your friends are so adamant about not wearing masks, so adamant about not socially distancing, it's because those people are enlightened enough to recognize the leftists in this country are using COVID as a means of changing the American mindset, changing our very way of thinking about freedom and how much freedom we have and who decides how much freedom we have. You will see Joe Biden and his administration use COVID to continue to the drumbeat away, taking away from Americans their freedom, taking away their idea of their right to run their business and hire who they want and have people in their business. It has been this is kind of 3 points I'm going to hit about COVID, hit about Biden and why electing him, you talk about what could change so much in 4 years, because if the Biden-Harris, whoever else she's going to bring in team are done in 4 years, you will have an electorate in this country. You'll have a majority electorate in this country. Submissive, subservient, completely abandoning the notion of self-reliance, the notion of a God-given right to live in freedom, the notion of the government is a limited government designed to be limited by the powers the Constitution says it has. You're going to see, and this is what the leftists are euphoric over, is they can use COVID to take away the whole cultural fabric of freedom in America. You'll find in 4 years a majority of people simply saying, well, you know what, COVID came along, so pretty soon we weren't allowed to go here, we can't go there, we can't travel, we can't get on airplanes. And the left has used COVID, to be clear, in a very similar way to what the left tried to use climate change. Climate change was another agenda issue. The left used the climate change argument to argue that government should get to control what kind of car you drive, where you can live, what kind of heater you can have in your home, your water supply, and whether you have access to it, and who's allowed to control your water supply. The entire climate change industry, the radical left-wing climate change industry, was another vehicle the left used to work away at, to chip away at the commitment of our Constitution and our founding ideas of America, that individuals have rights, have the right to freedom, to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness from God because they were born. The founding ideas of America cannot live in the same political universe with socialism, Marxism, communism, leftism. They are utterly opposite. They cannot live together. The founding ideas of America promise freedom. The founding ideas of Marxism, socialism, communism, from the very starting point, communism, socialism, Marxism are all about the idea the government has power, it decides what is allowed, what is not, and the people wait to be told what's allowed. That's the fundamental premise. The government owns everything, they control everything, and they tell you how much freedom you can have. That's what communism, Marxism, socialism are all about, and leftism in America today. On the other hand, America's founding idea is that we the people with rights from God because we were born. The fundamental assuming starting point in America is that we have God-given freedom, and we the people decide how much freedom or what we're going to agree the government can control. Obviously the government, we have to have laws to prevent crime, so that laws don't prevent crime, but they outlaw criminal actions. And so we have a way to get people who are dangerous out of society. We have a way to defend our country from foreign invaders. We have to have a military. We have to have a strong military. We have to have borders. We have government do some functions that are legitimate. But the fundamental premise of America is that people have the right to live in freedom. This is what the left can't live with. The leftists in this country, the Marxist, socialist, communist movement in this country that has completely taken over the Democrat Party, completely controls its agenda, its platform, its policies, the way it speaks, its whole mission. The entire Democrat Party's agenda has been taken over by the radical left in this country. And this is how much damage they could do. Not just individual policies, but the continuing chipping away at, wearing away at the fundamental premise of freedom in America. Another thing, so you talk about how things could change in 4 years, not just will we have COVID restrictions telling you which day you're allowed to breathe or whether you can get medications you want because the government is now taking them away from people. But you have the change in assumption, and that will carry over into the ideas of whether or not you can possess weapons. The left is never going to say, we're going to eliminate the Second Amendment. They're going to, in the same way they use COVID to chip away at your freedom, they're going to use promises of safety, love for their fellow citizens, and concern about violence to take away the Second Amendment right of Americans to keep and bear arms. That constitutional amendment being there to promise to give the people a means of protecting themselves from tyranny. The Second Amendment is not there for skeet shooting, hunting, or even self-defense in your home. The reason for the Second Amendment is to guarantee that people in this country is to keep the balance of power between the people and the government. It is to make sure the government understands that people are primary, we the people are primary in our formation of our country and policies. Another thing the left can't stand. So you will see, under Biden, you will see, or whoever's really running the country, you'll see the gradual taking away of weapons, the increasing of regulation controlling who has access to weapons, lengthening of all sorts of requirements. You'll have registration. You'll have more and more means of taking away the right of the individual to live in freedom. You will also see, as the left continues, it's just relentless takeover, this tyrannical takeover. You'll see things like, I mentioned the censorship of Scott Atlas, a doctor who is supposed to be serving on President Trump's coronavirus task force. But if you think that Twitter and Facebook and all the other social media giants censor now, you wait until the leftists run this country. You wait and see what happens when the leftists run this country, when you have leftists deciding whether or not there's been an undue interference with your freedom of speech. The left will find reasons to outlaw hate speech, to put you in jail for hate speech, and hate speech will come to mean anything that you say that's contrary to the left-wing agenda in this country. People, the left is hell-bent on tyranny, on Marxist tyrannical control of this country. You can't even begin to list all the ways that will be manifested if they have the White House, the Senate, and the House. These are not ordinary political times. These are times when we have seen the culmination of 100 years of the left working to bring communism, Marxism, not just bring, mainstream, legitimize, make appear to be normal, the normalization of communism, Marxism, socialism, leftism, all of that ugliness of the left. This is the 100-year mark on their effort to bring it to America, and they're not going to give up lightly. I'll tell you the other things we could talk about. I don't want to get into it too much. I'll do it another day, but we talk about how much life could change under Biden. There is the issue of taxes, and I just have a quick clip to play. We'll get into this another day, what the Biden tax plan would mean to you, because you might think, sounds good to me, what do I care? He's only raising taxes on people who earn over $400,000 a year. That's not me, what do I care? Everything in our economy will change. I'm going to have Derek at the Wonderful play in just a moment, a clip that Biden, a little thing that was that, it's not Biden speaking, it's actually a left-wing, a left-wing journalist trying to tell America what Biden has in mind for this. This is raising taxes, the YouTube labeled raising taxes. I want you to listen to this and just recognize to raise those kind of taxes is going to change not just how much money the government has to create new programs, but it's a massive big picture shift in America. Do the people own the wealth and they pay taxes to government to do necessary government functions? Or does the government own everything or most things and they let you, the people, know how much of your own money you can have? Derek, I want to quick play that clip.
Well, the truth is that Joe Biden, even though he's portrayed as a moderate, is offering the most expensive Democratic tax plan that we've seen from any Democratic candidate in recent history. Hillary Clinton's total plan was $1.5 trillion. Biden's plan is $4 trillion. And basically, it's because he's raising the ordinary income tax rate on, as he said, those who make more than $400,000. He's raising the capital gains rate to be 39.6 from 20%. That is by far the biggest capital gains tax increase ever. And then he's raising the corporate income tax rate from 21% to 28%. Add all of that together, it's $4 trillion in spending, 1.5% of GDP. That would be a 1.5% decline in GDP over 10 years. And the question is not so much, is this what the Democratic Party wants? Because of course it is. But is this the right time to do it? And I was a little surprised that Biden basically said, yes, no matter what's happening in the economy, we want to raise.
All right, we're going to run out of time on the show. I want to make this point. We're going to dive in, because all you people out there are thinking you don't really care if Biden has a huge tax plan, because after all, it's not going to hurt you. You have to understand, if he takes money away from the job creators, the business builders, the impact filters its way through all of the economy. There won't be jobs. There won't be new businesses. If he takes it away, if he says, we're just going to punish all these job creator types, the end of the day, the American people suffer. And I will just tell you, this one quick study talked about it. Given what Biden is promising, his economic agenda would necessarily destroy about 4.9 million jobs and reduce the annual median household income by $6,500. The average Joe will suffer under this plan that Biden has. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. 50 Cent, the rapper, came out when he finally realized that Biden was going to do it to his taxes. Said, no way, I'm for Trump all the way. We're going to do more on Biden's tax plan tomorrow. But understand, to sum up this segment, what could Biden do in 4 years? He could render America subservient, helpless sheep by his pressing on COVID-19 fears, spreading those fears, spreading regulations, shutting down all sorts of normal commerce. He could, through his tax plan, render Americans simply unable to be job creators, to have their own capital, their own property, their own wealth. This is a man who happens to be the guy that the Democrats got over the finish line in the primary, who is now their candidate for president. Doesn't matter at all whether you think he's a nice guy or whether you think he's in charge of his mental faculties or he's not. He's a guy that's going to put forth the radical leftist agenda in this country. America will never be the same. And we've talked the other day, I forgot which guest we had on, we were talking about the idea how many people that under President Obama's term, he planted and seeded, as in slipped in to all sorts of high-level places in the federal government. People who agree with the Biden radical leftist Marxist agenda, people who stayed there, they were holdovers. So as the new people came on board, and it was Rich Higgins. Oh, you should listen to Rich Higgins' interview too if you missed that. Rich Higgins served the National Security Council, talking about, you soon recognize the National Security Council was filled with Obama holdovers who were unwilling at all to go along with the Trump agenda, the new president, but thought their job was to press the Obama Marxist agenda in this country, to undermine the president. There is almost no limit to the damage, not just financial damage you can fix with a new piece of tax legislation that changes tax rates, but the fabric of freedom in this country. It's already been seriously under assault from the left under COVID, and also use the climate change argument to the assault on freedom. People, we won't recognize our country. It is that serious.